Good morning. It's Tuesday, August 18th, and you're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 10:31 a.m. Eastern Time launch from pad Slick 40 at our Cape Canaveral launch site in Florida. Hello from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm a senior certification engineer here at SpaceX. You're watching a live webcast for our 11th Starlink mission. This morning's launch represents a couple of milestones: our 14th mission of 2020, our 90th Falcon 9 mission, and the first time for reusing a booster for the 6th time. To date, we've launched nearly 600 Starlink satellites to orbit. As a reminder, Starlink is a constellation of satellites that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet all over the globe, particularly in remote or rural areas where connectivity is limited or completely unavailable. We have 3 small sat passengers on board today's mission for our customer Planet, the operators of the largest constellation of Earth observation satellites. You may remember we also successfully launched 3 SkySats for Planet on a Starlink mission in June earlier this year. The satellites on today's mission will enable high-resolution imaging of a single location up to 12 times a day. They'll be joining 18 SkySats already in orbit, completing Planet's fleet of 21 satellites, making it the largest high-resolution fleet of satellites in orbit to date. Now, in order to make room for those 3 rideshare passengers, we will be launching 58 Starlink satellites today into low Earth orbit instead of the usual 60, as we have done in the past. Planet SkySats will deploy in 3 sequential maneuvers beginning at about 12.5 minutes after liftoff, and the Starling satellites will deploy at 46 minutes after liftoff. So at this point, we're at just under 8.5 minutes until liftoff, and right now all systems are go for an on-time liftoff this morning. There on your screen is Falcon 9, our 2-stage liquid-fueled launch vehicle, getting ready for launch from Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Falcon 9 stands 70 meters tall, which is just greater than the wingspan of a 747 aircraft. Today's flight will be the 6th flight for this booster. It previously supported the Telstar 18 VANTAGE mission, Iridium 8, the first Starlink mission, as well as the 3rd and 8th Starlink missions. And this will mark the first time that we're flying a booster for its 6th mission. The bottom 2/3 of the vehicle that you see there is the first stage. And if you look closely, you can actually see the white clouds there are covering it up at the moment, but there are soot markings still on the vehicle from its previous 5 flights. The first stage has 9 Merlin engines that do the bulk of the work to get Falcon 9 off the ground and up into the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere, before separating from second stage and making its way back down to Earth for landing. Today we will be attempting to recover this first stage for the 6th time. This time we'll be doing that on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which is currently stationed in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see it there on your screen, about 350 nautical miles northeast of our Cape Canaveral, Florida launch site. On top of the first stage is the Interstage, which is the black segment of the rocket that you see there. The reason it's black as opposed to the rest of the vehicle is because it is unpainted TPS, or thermal protective system, and that TPS is what protects the composite material in which the Interstage is made out of. The Interstage is what connects the first stage to the second stage and protects the second stage's single Merlin vacuum, or MVAC, engine during launch. That MVAC engine ignites after the first stage separates and will propel the second stage, along with Planet's 3 SkySats and our 58 Starlink satellites, into an elliptical orbit above Earth's surface. Like I mentioned earlier, Planet's SkySats will deploy sequentially at about 12 minutes and 30 seconds after liftoff, and our Starlink satellites will deploy around T+46 minutes. Falcon 9 has been loading propellant since T-35 minutes. As a reminder, Falcon 9 uses a rocket-grade kerosene, which we call RP1, for our fuel, and superchilled liquid oxygen, or LOX, as our oxidizer. Currently, RP1 and LOX are nearly fully loaded on both stages, and liquid oxygen will continue to be topped off right until the last minutes of the countdown. The stack of 58 Starlink satellites and 3 SkySats are safely enclosed right inside of that structure, our payload fairing, which is a 17-foot diameter structure at the top of the rocket. The fairing protects the satellites from aerothermal heating, aerodynamic loads, and contamination during the ascent phase. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we'll jettison those fairing halves while the second stage will continue on to orbit. The fairing halves that we're using today previously flew on the Starlink mission that we launched earlier this year in January. We will be attempting to recover these fairing halves today using our recovery ships, which you can see there on your screen, Ms. Chief and Ms. Tree. At approximately T plus 40 minutes, or roughly 2 minutes before landing, the recovery team will perform a poll to confirm if we're good to make a safe catch attempt. As you might imagine, weather plays a big factor into that go, no-go decision for the catch attempt, as it can impact not only the sea states for the boats, but also the fairing's altitude, position, and speed, which impact all how the fairing will fall back to Earth. As of right now, weather is looking good. We have got blue skies and just a couple of clouds there at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The vehicle, the satellites, and the weather and the range are all looking good for an on-time liftoff of 10:31 a.m. Eastern at just under 4 minutes from now. For those of you that might be newer to the Starlink program, little info for you. Our mission is to bring high-speed, low-latency internet to people all over Earth. Every one of these Starlink missions gets us closer to achieving that goal. Some of the most exciting opportunities for Starlink are locations where traditional fiber or cable is simply not practical, such as rural and remote communities. It's also exciting for places where fiber and cable are impossible, such as aircrafts and cruise ships. This is a big endeavor, and we have a lot of work ahead of us, but today's launch gets us one step closer to these goals. If you're interested in getting future news about our Starlink service, head on over to starlink.com and sign up for updates. And if you're interested in helping roll out Starlink to the world, our Redmond, Washington location, which is just outside of Seattle, is looking for talented software engineers. The software engineers here at SpaceX get to drive work across exciting projects such as our rockets, spacecrafts, and satellites and ground systems. Send your resume to softwarejobs@spacex.com if you're interested in joining our team. So right now, we are just under 2.5 minutes from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is moving into the final stages of the countdown. Right now, the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Fuel is completely loaded. LOX on the first stage is also completely loaded, and we are continuing to top off the liquid oxygen loading on the second stage. Super chilled liquid oxygen, which, like I mentioned, we call LOX, is our propellant oxidizer, and that's what is creating those white clouds around the vehicle that you see there. This happens when liquid oxygen is exposed to ambient air, which is warmer, and causes the liquid oxygen to evaporate into gas and form those white clouds. The first stage should finish prop loading here, and actually I just noticed that all fuel tanks and liquid oxygen tanks are now fully loaded, so complete there on the prop load. Here in just 30 seconds or so, we'll hear a call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. It means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. At T minus 2 seconds, the Merlin engines will light, and liftoff will be commanded to the vehicle at T minus 0. So right now, as we approach the T minus 1 minute mark, the Starlink payload and the Planet payloads continue to look healthy. Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather continues to look good, and the range is green for launch.
Falcon 9 is in startup. Falcon 9 is in startup. Stage 2, press for flight.
LD is go for launch. LD is go for launch.
T minus 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay, so we're in the final phases of the countdown. Let's
Stage
watch
one,
as
startup
Falcon
pressures.
9 takes
T-minus
our
15
58
seconds.
Starlink satellites and
Falcon
3
9
Planet
is beginning
SkySats
flight.
into orbit.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. Ignition. And liftoff for the Falcon 9. Go Starling.
Stage 1 propulsion download.
A successful liftoff of Falcon 9
Power
from
telemetry
Space
nominal.
Launch Complex 40 for this 11th Starlink mission. The 3 Planet SkySats and our 58 Starlink satellites are on their way to space. In about 10 seconds, we will be approaching max Q. Merlin engines are now
Vehicle
throttling
supersonic.
down as they anticipate the moment of greatest aerodynamic pressure.
Max Q.
All right, we just went through max Q, and the vehicle is now supersonic, and Merlin engines have throttled back up. So coming up in about a minute, we'll have 3 events happening back to back. First will be main engine cutoff, or MECO. This is where all 9 Merlin engines will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for the second
Back
event,
engine chill has
stage
started.
separation. This is where the first stage separates from the second stage, with stage 1 starting to make its way back to Earth for landing, while second stage will kick off the third event in this sequence, SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1. This is where that Merlin vacuum engine will ignite and begin to propel the second stage along with our payloads into orbit. Main engine cutoff coming up in about 20 seconds. Everything continuing to look nominal for stage 1.
We have MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And in-back ignition.
All right, so there we saw those 3 events all happen in quick succession. Stage 1 is now making its way back to Earth. There on the left-hand side of your screen, we can see the grid fins slowly deploying. And on the right-hand side of your screen, the Merlin vacuum engine beginning to develop that healthy orange glow as it continues its journey on to orbit.
Fairing separation confirmed.
We're just a few seconds away from fairing deployment. There we go, visual confirmation of fairing deployment. Once again, as a reminder, we flew those fairings on a previous Starlink mission in January earlier this year. So with that, we have successfully reused this fairing pair. Like I said earlier, we will be attempting to catch those fairing halves with our recovery ships, Ms. Tree and Ms. Chief.
Bermuda acquisition of
Everything
signal.
continuing nominally. While the second stage is continuing to do its job, the first stage is making its way back home to Earth. In the next few minutes, it will be executing 2 burns. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines at the bottom of the first stage will light up and begin to slow the stage down as it re-enters the
Impact
upper part
motion
of the
nominal.
Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is known as the landing burn. This is a single engine burn that will bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to make a soft landing on the drone ship. The 58
Stage 2
Starlink
on
satellites
nominal
that
trajectory.
are being carried along on the right-hand side of your screen there by the second stage will be joining our constellation of over 600 Starlink satellites that are already on orbit, which once again are designed to provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people on Earth. This is particularly important for places where good internet is hard to access, as well as places where wired or grounded internet is impossible, such as ships and airplanes. We're 1 minute away from the beginning of that entry burn. On the left-hand side of your screen, we can see stage 1 coasting using nothing but those grid fins. We see them articulate here and there as they continue to steer. And we also utilize nitrogen gas for occasional little bursts of that nitrogen gas, and we use that for attitude control, which sometimes you can catch a glimpse of as little white puffs. Second stage continuing nominally, now at 1.5 Gs for acceleration. And 10 seconds away now from the beginning of that entry burn. Again, this is the first of 2 burns intended to slow the vehicle's velocity
Stage
down
1
as
FTS
it
is
re-enters
saved.
the Earth's atmosphere.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there we can see that the entry burn has begun and will last for about 20 seconds.
Stage 2 continues on nominal trajectory.
Again, this burn utilizes 3 engines at the base of the rocket. And
Stage
there
1
we
entry
can
burn
see
shut
the
down.
entry burn has concluded. Second stage trajectory is still looking nominal. And in less than a minute, we will see the first stage on the left-hand side of the screen perform its landing burn. Looking back at our second stage, everything continues to look good. Once again, we are carrying 58 Starlink satellites prepared to join the over 600 Starlink satellites that are already on
Stage 1
orbit,
transonic.
as well as 3 rideshare satellites for our customer planets. Those 3 SkySats will join the 18 SkySats that are already also on orbit. We're about 15 seconds away from landing burn.
Terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn.
And landing burn has begun. You should see the
Stage
plume
2
from the
FTS is
rocket
saved.
appear on the screen here.
Stage
in
1
a
landing
second.
leg deploy.
Our touchdown and shut off.
Stage
Successful
1 landing
landing
confirmed.
of the first stage booster. Once again, this is the 6th time that we have utilized this booster on a mission, also marking its 6th landing.
Go.
This is the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. So turning our attention back to second stage, we've had
Nominal
confirmation
orbit insertion.
of second engine cutoff, or SECO-1. And we also have confirmation of a good
Useful
orbit.
acquisition of
So Now that stage 2 is going to coast in this orbit for another 3.5 minutes, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back at T plus 12 minutes for the deployment of Planet's 3 SkySats. Welcome back to the webcast for this 11th Starlink mission. We had an on-time liftoff from Cape Canaveral, and everything is looking nominal for our second stage. As we can see on our screen there, the stack of payloads. We are carrying 58 Starlink satellites, as well as 3 rideshare satellites for our customer Planet. We're about 10 seconds away from the first of 3 deployments for those Planet SkySats.
SkySat 21 deploy confirmed.
Okay, deployment confirmed for that first SkySat. The first of 3 this morning. And there on your screen, at the end of the stack, slowly making its way away from the second stage, we can see that first SkySat moving along.
SkySat 20 deploy confirmed.
And confirmation that the second SkySat has deployed. We'll see that here momentarily. There it is at the end of the stack again. And awaiting the third and final deployment for this rideshare customer.
And SkySat 19 deploy confirmed.
And deployment confirmed for that third and final SkySat for our customer Planet. These 3 SkySats will be joining 18 already on orbit, which will complete the fleet of 21 and make it the largest high-resolution fleet of satellites in orbit to date. Like I mentioned before, they'll be capable of imaging a single location up to 12 times a day. Right now, stage 2 is going to continue to coast in this orbit for a few more minutes. During this time, it will start to spin along its central axis, which will give those Starlink satellites the momentum they require to space themselves out over time after deployment at T plus 46 minutes. So right now we're going to take a break, but stay tuned because we'll be back at T plus 45 minutes in preparation for the deployment of those 58 Starlink satellites. Stay with us. Welcome back to the webcast for our 11th Starlink mission. We had an on-time liftoff at 10:31 a.m. Eastern Time from Cape Canaveral, Florida, for a 6th mission for this particular first stage. We landed it successfully on our drone ship. And there, as you can see on your screen, we successfully caught one of the fairing halves. That is a recovery vessel, Ms. Tree, caught that out of the air. The second fairing half made a soft water landing, so Ms. Chief is en route to scoop it out of the ocean. And before we went for a break, we saw the successful deployment of the 3 SkySat satellites for our customer Planet, which were ride-sharing along with Starlink. These 3 SkySats will be joining the 18 already on orbit and will complete Planet's fleet of 21 satellites and make it the largest high-resolution fleet of satellites in orbit to date. So here in just a couple of seconds, we will be deploying our 58 Starlink satellites, which will be joining the nearly 600 that are on orbit. Now, there is a chance, and it looks like I was just going to say that
Starlink tension rod separation confirmed.
we have an expected loss of signal over our ground station. There we go. We can see the visual confirmation of Starlink deployment. Like I said before, those 58 Starlinks will be joining 600 that are already on orbit, and shortly they will be deploying their solar arrays. Over the next few days and weeks, they will distance themselves out using the momentum created by the second stage.
Spin maneuver complete.
Like I said, we spun it along its central axis to provide the momentum required for those satellites to space out, as you can see there. So they'll be using their onboard ion thrusters to make their way to their operational orbit of 550 kilometers above Earth, and we'll begin to start beaming down high-speed internet to us Earthlings. And with that wonderful view of those Starlink satellites floating out into space, we will now bring our webcast to a close this morning. We'd like to thank our customer Planet for their continued support riding on board Falcon 9, as well as the FAA and the 45th Space Wing for supporting today's mission. If you're interested in getting future updates about Starlink launches, as well as general updates about future service availability, head over to starlink.com, sign up for updates, and we will see you next launch. Until then, have a good one.